4 images with frightening backstories. The Feral Child. This image dates back to 1970. The girl in the picture is Jenny Wiley, a child that was raised in Arcadia, California, in almost total isolation from other human beings until she was 13 years old. Her father, an aviation mechanic, didn't like kids and never wanted any of his own. But 5 years into his marriage, his wife got pregnant with their first daughter. Clark Wiley, Jenny's father, said he found his daughter noisy and annoying, and he locked her in the garage to avoid hearing her crying. The little girl ended up dying of pneumonia just 10 weeks after birth. 1 year later, the couple's second son was born, but also died just 2 days after birth due to health complications. It wasn't until 3 years later that Jenny's older brother was born, becoming the first healthy child in the family. Because Clark Wiley forced his wife to keep him quiet, Jenny's brother didn't develop normally and didn't learn to speak until a much later age. But it was nothing compared to what happened to Jenny, who was born 5 years after her brother. Although Jenny was relatively healthy at birth, her father refused to feed her a normal amount of food, and she developed symptoms of malnutrition. From the time she was born, her father didn't allow his wife and son to talk to Jenny while he was around, which kept her isolated from the rest of the world. It was also around that time that Jenny's paternal grandmother died in a hit-and-run traffic accident, which deeply affected Clark Wiley. In his grief, he moved his family to his late mother's 2-bedroom house, and he forced them all into isolation. For 13 hours each day, he tied Jenny to a toilet in a makeshift harness. She never wore anything but a diaper and could only move her hands and feet. Sometimes, she would also be forced to spend the night tied to the toilet. Because he had extremely low tolerance for any kind of noise, nobody was allowed to speak when they were close to Clark Wiley, and Jenny was kept in a dark, windowless room for most of the day. Not even the neighbors knew Jenny existed on account of her forced isolation. If Jenny cried, screamed, or made any noise in the house, her father would beat her with a wooden plank and scratch her with his long fingernails. Disturbingly, his wife later reported that he would often growl like a dog at her to scare her into silence. In 1970, his wife decided she couldn't take the abuse any longer and decided to run away with Jenny. Her plan was to support herself and her daughter by applying for disability benefits. Because Jenny's mother was almost completely blind, she accidentally walked into the social services office that was next door to the Social Security offices when she went to apply. When the social worker saw the state Jenny was in, she immediately called the police and Jenny was taken into state care. Her father was immediately arrested for child abuse, but he took his life before he could be put in prison. In the hospital, Jenny was taken care of by researchers and psychiatrists who tried to teach her to walk and talk. And that's when this image was taken. Because she had a problem in one of her hips and she had never been taught to walk properly, Jenny walked with her arms and legs at strange angles. Her movements were hesitant and unsteady, and she would often fall over due to an overall lack of strength. Because she had been locked in a windowless room for most of her life, she didn't know how to respond to her environment and was naturally fearful of people. Her doctors described her as the worst case of child abuse they had ever seen. A team of specialists tried to teach Jenny to speak, and although she made progress, she only reached the mental age of a 13-month-old after a year of learning. But her doctors refused to give up on her, and a few years later, she reached the mental age of an 8-year-old. She learned to speak about 30 words and could communicate using sign language. After some custody issues between her mother, the doctors who cared for her, and the researcher who wanted Jenny to live with her, Jenny spent many years living in foster homes, where she continued to suffer physical and emotional abuse. Jenny Wiley became one of the best-known case studies on the effects of prolonged isolation and abuse on children. Not much else is known about her life, but Jenny is currently living in a confidential location in Los Angeles. Momo. This image of what looks like a demonic chicken lady created a wave of panic across the globe in 2018 and 2019. But not everyone knows the true story behind the creature named Momo. Because the Blue Whale Challenge was so fresh in everyone's memory after several children were exposed to the malicious game in online groups in 2016, reports of Momo preying on children through their devices immediately caused a global panic, largely fueled by media hype and the fears of concerned parents. After the image started circulating in 2016 on WhatsApp, the instant messaging app, reports stating that the image of Momo was being used to contact kids and to instruct them to do dangerous things began to surface online. Children across the globe, especially in the US and Mexico, complained about being harassed by unknown numbers on WhatsApp and being sent images of the creepy bird woman. Disturbingly, dozens of large news outlets claimed that Momo was being used to manipulate children into harming themselves and to send videos of themselves committing dangerous acts, and the media was quick to name the phenomenon the Momo Challenge. Strangely, while parents and the media were going crazy, police only reported one incident in which a 12-year-old girl lost her life after Momo supposedly communicated with her through WhatsApp, but no real evidence was found that the creepy image was even involved in this situation. After the incident, the media started blowing the whole thing out of proportion, claiming that Momo was luring children into dangerous situations, but there was always a lack of solid evidence for these claims. Police and online safety groups warned parents to keep their children safe online, and the Momo craze began to lose steam after parents realized that the whole thing seemed more like an urban legend and a viral hoax than a life-threatening situation for their kids. Less than a year later, it looked like Momo was making a comeback after it was reported that hackers had planted images of the creepy creature in Peppa Pig and Fortnite videos on YouTube Kids. Again, there was no actual evidence that Momo was being edited into videos for children, but the media jumped on the trend and caused widespread panic anyway. Greedy media outlets made a monster out of Momo and created panic over an online challenge that never existed just to get more viewers. But in reality, Momo was just an art project made by a Japanese artist working for Link Factory, a company that makes props for movies. After seeing how much trouble his statue had accidentally caused, the artist destroyed the statue forever. Regina Walters. This image of Regina Walters has been haunting the internet since the early 90s. In February 1990, 14-year-old Regina Walters and her 18-year-old boyfriend Rick Jones ran away from their homes in Pasadena, California, to start a new life in Mexico. As they were hitchhiking their way out of Houston, a friendly trucker offered them a lift. They accepted, not knowing that the man who had offered them a ride was Robert Ben Rhodes, a man who would later be known as the Truck Stop Killer. After the teenagers got on the truck, Robert immediately killed Regina's boyfriend and then locked Regina in a makeshift torture chamber he had rigged in the back of his truck. For over a month, he kept her handcuffed to the truck's ceiling in the back chamber and frequently called the girl's father from payphones to torment him about his missing daughter, taunting him by telling him that he knew where Regina was. A few weeks later, Robert Rhodes took Regina's life and left her body in an abandoned farmhouse in Greenville, Illinois, but not before taking this chilling image of Regina wearing a black dress, holding out her hands in a defensive gesture. Police later found that Robert Rhodes had done the same thing he did to Regina to at least 50 other women between 1975 and 1990. Although he was sentenced to life in prison, Robert Rhodes left behind some of the most terrifying photos ever entered into evidence. The Nighttime Visitor. In 2016, a user named Fat and Depressed posted this creepy image to Reddit with the caption, "Got a notification from my smart home app in the middle of the night saying, 'Your doorbell detected a visitor.'" The user had a smart doorbell with a motion detector that would send a message to his phone whenever something or somebody got close to the door. For several nights in a row, he kept getting notifications on his phone saying that his doorbell detected a visitor at random times between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. The first few times he checked the security system footage, nothing seemed to appear, and the man thought that the camera maybe detected a stray dog or a random passerby on the street, or that maybe it had even been a false alarm. One night, he received 5 notifications between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. At first, he couldn't see anyone at the door, but after he received another notification at 4 a.m., he checked the cameras again and found a man wearing a creepy mask peering into the doorbell camera. He appeared to be holding his hands behind his back as if he was hiding something. After the post received attention from thousands of other users asking if he was okay, Fat and Depressed reported that thankfully the visitor hadn't come back again. It was never confirmed why the creepy man spent so much time lurking around the entrance to his house for so many nights in a row.